Over the past year, there's been more attention to the country's economic divide. Even here in Massachusetts, the gap has been getting larger, and there have been more efforts to close the gap by raising pay. That especially goes for working people with the lowest pay, many of them in the fast food sector. Our guests have been taking on the issue as a present-day problem, but also as a lesson in Jewish cultural history, which includes an important chapter in America's labor movement. That was the foundation for a holiday greeting last weekend for the operators of Burger King, from students at the Sunday school run by an organization with deep roots in the labor movement, the Boston Workmen Circle. And joining us are one of the students, Simon Chernow, and the education director, Jenny Silverman. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
I want to start with Jenny if viewers need an introduction to the Workmen Circle. This started in New York, I think, but this really had quite a presence in Boston, even in Dorchester, I think, at one point.
Yes, it did. This is a 100-year-old organization, more than 100 years, actually, at this point. Started in New York right around 1900 by immigrants from Eastern Europe, and they started a self-help organization, but they themselves were workers in sweatshops in New York, and they were very closely allied to the labor movement. And I think the first group in Boston started around 1910, 1912, so we've been around for about 100 years.
So one way of teaching students about this history is by having the students pay attention to things going on now, right?
Right. Part of our whole curriculum teaches Jewish history and culture, and so of course immigrant history and what was happening in the labor movement with Jewish involvement in the labor movement is a big part of our 5th grade curriculum. Rather than leave it as part of ancient history, we try to connect it to what's going on now, and we know that there's still many workers who are struggling to make a decent wage and have good working conditions, many of them also immigrants now. And so we try to teach the students about something that's going on right now.
Simon, talk about what you've learned, because I guess even before the protest at Burger King, you learned something from somebody who works at one of the fast food establishments, right?
Well, yeah, he works as one of the fast food establishments.
And he came into your class, I think, right?
Yeah, for the class before, and he talked about like how the working conditions for fast food workers and how they were getting paid minimum wage, and it's not enough, it's below the poverty line, and it's not enough to support yourself, and if you have a family, your family too.
Anything about how hard people have to work, either because you have to do things quickly or do some lifting? Or
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff like, I mean, a lot of people go to fast food, so there's a lot of working involved in it, and it's not like a job where like a few customers come in every once in a while.
Chris, Jenny, Chris, what you're also teaching students is that when you see something that strikes you as unfair, you try to do something about it. So what was the project here?
Yeah, I mean, there's very much a Jewish tradition of social activism, of trying to make the world a better place. And so when we teach the students about this history and about the current issues, we work with them to try to come up with something to do and to show solidarity with the workers. So the students help decide what they were going to do about this. And maybe Simon wants to talk about what you did.
Yeah, well, this is about some greetings, so explain what you did with that, Simon.
Well, we got these cards that had a little information about what we were doing, and we passed it around to everybody, and they had to sign it. And we got all these signatures, and then when we actually went to the protest, we were going to give it to the manager, but they didn't open the doors for us, so we left it in front of the door, and we put a stick over it just so they knew that we had people. It wasn't just the people that were there. We had a lot of people behind it.
Now, I assume when you went there, the business was in operation, so I mean,
Yeah.
You couldn't get inside, or?
Well, first we had like a script where we talked to the audience that came with us, and we did some chants. And then when it went to come in, just my class came in, and right before we got to the door, one of the workers locked the door, and then we went around to the other one, and he locked that door. And so we just asked to talk to the manager, and the worker said he said no comment, like he wasn't going to answer any questions. And so what we ended up doing is putting the signed papers and just letting them left them by the door for him to acknowledge it.
What do you think of how they handled that?
Well, not good, because they didn't like a good way to handle it is at least to like see what their problem is and see how they could help to fix it. But they didn't even like let us say anything. Like we didn't talk to anybody. Like we went to the door, they locked it. We went to the other door and they locked that. There wasn't much like actually like talking involved.
Jenny, what do you think the take home should be from that? I mean, certainly Simon was pretty eloquent, but I guess this is an important part of the lesson for students too.
It is, and you know, I think it would have been great to be able to just talk to the manager and for the students to be able to present their cards, and the manager could have acknowledged that and said thank you for your concern. But the fact that they wouldn't even talk to the kids, I mean, we had 12 fifth graders, not exactly a dangerous crowd, I think sent a lesson to our students. They were, confused and disappointed that the management wouldn't at least talk to them. But I think that, what we said is, don't be disheartened. It's a long struggle. This is, there have been a number of protests at this particular restaurant, and that they knew that we were there, and they would probably eventually take the cards in. But
Simon, you mentioned there were some other people there as well, maybe people from the community. What was that like for you?
Well, it was like a lot of help because they were like right up there with us, and they were doing the cheers too, and they like went up to the door, and they were like being just like adding on to the crowd and making it a bigger deal to Burger King.
How did that make you feel, people going along with your protest like that?
Well, I thought that when we would come, it was like, I didn't really think that people were going to come. I didn't know that it was some like big thing that got around to everybody. But then when I got there, there were like maybe like 100 people there. And so it was like, it was bigger than what I thought it was.
So in the future, if you try to get a project going, get some people involved, you can make things work then, right? Mm-hmm. Jenny, what about this other lesson the students hear? Because some other people watching this might be saying, yes, it's true that people who work in these establishments ought to get paid more money, but why should students get involved in that?
Right. Well, it's very important to us in terms of what we're teaching to our kids. We're teaching them a living history. We're not teaching them about things that happened a long time ago and aren't continuing. And at Boston Workmen Circle, our curriculum is very much based on Jewish ethics and how do you make the world a better place. And so I think this teaching about activism, we teach our fifth graders not only about the labor movement, we also, the next unit is about Jews in the civil rights movement. And there's a long, proud history of Jewish involvement as activists to make the world a better place, and we want our kids to both understand that history and be part of that. And
of course, the great chapter of all here, I know this is in New York City, but in that tragic Shirtwaist Fire, I think back in 1911, the things that resulted from that, there were the organizing, because a lot of the Jewish women immigrants who were working there lost their lives. That really changed the course of history.
It did. And we do teach about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. We have a chorus at the Workmen Circle that did a whole show about this a couple of years ago. And we also teach the kids, once again, this is not something that happened a long time ago and has all been fixed, but if you read the news, you know that a lot of the garment workers now are in places like Bangladesh, where there have been some terrible fires and workers losing their lives as well.
History repeated. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, Simon Chernow and Jenny Silverman. We'll have more news in just a moment.